Hey Kathy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Bede?
Good. Now we were gonna, from last time we were gonna talk about. Could you just explain what level confusion means? Because Ken Wapnick said that when people approach the course, often they make a profound mistake and they confuse levels. In other words, they instead of two things remaining differentiated and distinct in their mind, they merge them together. Can you explain that, please?
Yes, level one is the level of truth, and level two is everything else, what would be described as our own nightmare. Anything outside of heaven, God, truth, and love is our own nightmare. And so the way in which all of us go through level confusion, because that's part of the dream. But it would be to take a concept that is only part of the truth, like love or joy, and try to see it within the dream. And try to have it kind of come to life within an illusion, but nothing comes to life within the illusion. There is no truth in illusion. There's either awareness of illusion or there's awareness of truth. And one thing Ken spent a lot of time on is um, is addressing the idea that any of us here could know oneness, could have the slightest idea of what oneness or love means, because once we join with ego, we're the manifestation of the ego, and our job is not to figure out love or find love or call love to us. It is to look at the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And those blocks are the ideas we've set up about ourselves, the world, God, and look upon the denial of truth with Jesus. And we know we're doing that if we can look upon everything we made and the darkness when we deny the light without judgment.
So just so we're clear, so let's say, for example, when we're having an argument with someone close to us, right?
Mhm.
And we are seeing them as a proper so-and-so. So that's me being caught in a certain way, enclosed in a certain way of seeing, and my whole experience is arising out of that way of seeing. Because normally I tend to think experiences are happening to me, but what we're looking at really is happening out of me. So because I'm seeing my spouse or myself or the world as a horrible place or as whatever it is that I happen to be seeing, uh, I'm enclosed in it, so I'm not seeing in the light of the truth, right? So when you say that we're going to learn a new way of seeing from level one, we're not saying that level one, we're bringing level one down so that the level one understanding is reflected in this life in terms of a new perception. Is that right?
Yes. So what we all do and what we're sort of taught to do is to basically blame the world for our experience. We're going to encounter conflict here because we're seeing our experience as being caused by something outside of us. Even if it's my body or if I'm arguing with someone else, I'm blaming them for the experience I'm having. And I'm feeling anger, conflict, all forms of fear, because fear is the material of the dream. It's literally what it's made of once you reject love. And so uh, shifting our perception would be saying, initially raising a question. I could be wrong about the cause of my experience. Maybe
Ah,
it is not something outside of me. And if I'm willing to entertain that, I can begin the process of withdrawing my projection.
right. So it seems to me a universal experience that we say, I'm upset because of this, or I'm upset because of this, or I'm upset because of myself, or I'm upset because of the way my body is, or I'm upset because of what that person has said, or I'm upset about the conditions I'm in. It seems to be a fundamental human premise that events that I'm looking at, the experience I'm looking at, is causing me to be unhappy. So what you're saying is that's a wrong view. It doesn't seem to be a wrong view. It seems to be the right view. But what you're saying is that the course challenges that fundamental premise that it opens up a possibility of seeing things differently. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that that is a first step. And I think it even uses that language. The Holy Spirit doesn't seek to frighten you, to just raise a question about the way you've seen things your whole life. And we all live in a world where we get plenty of support for that perception too. We when we can get some allies and have a common enemy, what's stronger than that around here? Um, so we get all that support, but the course does challenge us, like you said, to raise a question about whether or not I am a victim of the world I see, and whether or not I am at the mercy of things beyond my control. Those ideas that we believe we kind of come into this world and maintain our innocence at the cost of someone else's guilt, because none of us escape pain in the world. And so in order to um, uh, as the course would say, kind of perceive our innocence, someone else has to be responsible for that pain, even if it's just my parents for bringing me into the world. I mean, and that is the projection of the ego thought system.
So this thing of where we're always pointing outwards, it's that, it's
Yeah.
that, it's that. If only that would change and whatever. So I listened to something just recently where it said that when you really understand that peace and understanding are not separate. So in other words, so we're not just talking about trying to see rightly like the cognitive psychologist would be talking about. We're wanting a vision of life that brings about a state of peace, irrespective of what's happening in front of you. Would you say that's true?
Yes, and I think an important piece of that is not just perceiving um, what you believe is the cause of your pain differently in this way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that person did something bad, but they had a terrible childhood. It's not about that type of perceptual
Mm-hmm.
change. That level of forgiveness that is at the level of the world, level two.
Right.
The course would call forgiveness to destroy, because I first condemned them and then forgiven.
Right. So when see, I know the experience of I'm holding something against something. I'm holding. I'm feeling depressed, so I think the depression's causing me upset, and I've got a grievance against that, or I've got a grievance against how people have treated me, or I've got a grievance a bit about past events or things that have happened to me, and so in one sense, I'm very unforgiving in terms of the world, other people, and even myself. I've got grievances concerning it.
Right, we
So,
all do.
yeah. So what we're talking about here, when we're talking about the course, is a process or an approach to life where we can be liberated from these feelings of grievance and upset and resentment against other people, ourselves, in the world. Would you say would that be correct?
Yes, that would definitely be a goal, and that is the goal of the process, because the course's goal, of course, is to be happy, but first you have to see how unhappy you are with what you're doing, in terms of the blame.
Right. So what we have is we've got our normal way of seeing in the world, which in the course it calls it the ego thought system. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not only am I in the ego thought system, I am the ego thought system in terms of my
Yeah.
life. And unless I can be lifted into a new way of seeing, uh, and it's not just simply changing my thinking. Do you know what I mean? A new way of seeing that brings about a way of being in the world that is being peaceful. In other words, there's no grievances, no hatred, and there's no fears about the future. There's no regrets about the past. That's the practical aspect, isn't it? So that the
Yeah.
more I am drawn into the right way of seeing, the right minded thought system, the more I'm drawn out of what I'm normally caught in, and this is the liberating factor. Have I got that right?
Yes, that's the end game. The peace, the pure reflection of peace is the end game. And I think that there can be different stages. First, we realize that what we're doing, and then uh, see how much we disrupt our own peace. So there's that split mind. I say I want peace, but I really want to um, hold on to my grievances, condemnation, and judgments. And I don't, and so that there's that split mind that comes up as you practice the course. I want peace, but I also want my grievances.
Well, there's a kind of like a dialectic or an interplay, isn't there, between the two kinds of mind? Because when I, for example, you know, in Australia we have the, you know, what they're called bitch sessions, where people just rubbish, you know, sit in a group and they go, oh, isn't that terrible, and oh, isn't that horrible and stuff. And
Yeah.
I must admit, it's a truly delicious experience when you're actually pointing about the badness and the faults of other people over there, because it gives you a kind of a pristine feeling of your own goodness. But
exactly, luxuriating in our specialness.
yeah. But so we're not. So I studied in India for about 14 months. Studied traditional Vedanta. But what's interesting about the course? It says that we can't know the truth in the absolute sense at this level, but we can. But the truth from the absolute level, from level one, can be reflected in a way of being in the world, but it comes from above. But it's not the total picture, but it is the reflection of God's love at this level. And in fact, the course says that forgiveness is when you're actually in a state of being which is being forgiving. This is at this level 2, a reflection of God's love, which is level 1. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that could be considered clearing the mirror, the dark mirror we look into and we see our ego, and that's what we believe we are, and we don't remember anything else. We have no memory of anything else. But so the course would say, clean but the mirror, and what you truly are will be reflected back at you. But that what has made the mirror dirty is our decision about what the truth must be. And so we've decided what the truth is, and in being willing to question that and follow the course process, we're basically leaving blank the space where we decided what we were. We decided what everybody else was. So then the truth can be reflected fully, and that would be considered the 6th stage in the development of trust, the final stage where peace is fully reflected. And before that, our practice is to essentially be in our wrong mind and look upon that with Jesus. That's what being in your right mind is, being in your wrong mind and looking upon it with Jesus or the Holy Spirit. And the way you know you're doing that is if you can do it without judgment. You can look at all the ugliness of the ego thought system that you are now the manifestation of, and without judgment. And that's how you move up the ladder.
Now that's I've always found interesting about the course. You know what I mean? Like, and I haven't been studying it for very long, but what's interesting is that we are using our present experience of life to show us whether or not we're looking at life in the right way or in the wrong way. So that if I am if I'm being upset, I'm being anxious, I'm being angry. So the course invites us to be completely honest about what we're actually experiencing,
right?
Because that is a reflection of whether or not we're in the right mind or in the wrong mind. And
yes.
so, but if we can't be completely and utterly accepting of what we're like, we'll condemn ourselves. I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't feel this way. I should feel this way. But in the course, we're not interested in some kind of idealism of becoming a nice person or a better version of ourselves or more loving and all that nonsense.
Right.
What we want to do is we first of all want to establish right here, right now, as I am, I'm feeling lonely. Now, that is the beginning point. It also, that would be, of course, premise. If I'm feeling lonely, I'm obviously not aware of God's presence, loving presence. So the meaning of it is that what resolves the feeling of loneliness is that if I have got an idea in my mind that my life and being is separate and apart from God, separate and apart from the presence of love, then that is going to be dark and problematic. So when I arrive at an understanding for real, not not as a belief. Oh, yes, God's always here, but I've got to come into a factual uh, appreciation of God's presence in order to lift me out of that loneliness. Is that true?
Yes, that's exactly it. I think there's the course contains a number of exercises that are designed to follow that process to kind of transcend that moment, look back on it from a different perspective, from above the battleground. Because even if you're feeling lonely, there is still some in pain of any kind, there is still some version of projecting out guilt onto something, and there's still the same dynamic as though it was involving someone else, and to kind of look upon that through different eyes.
Yeah. Because like when you're lonely, is I am by myself. Do you know what I mean? And because I'm by myself, I take the loneliness to be the problem. I think my problem is loneliness, and I'm experiencing it. It's
Yeah,
happened to me. But there's a very interesting saying in the course, which I found very interesting, is that I'm never upset for the reason I think. So even when I'm looking at inward states, I'm lonely, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm feeling empty. I'm saying that the cause of my experience are these states.
right,
But
right.
in actual fact, from the course's perspective, so this is what's interesting I find about level one and level two. The level two experience is that these states are upsetting me, and if they weren't there, I'd be happy. But
Yeah,
but from a level one point of view, which is the higher level, is that I'm upset and unhappy because I'm actually cut off from the love of God because I actively want to preserve my own existence separate and apart from God. So
right.
so in this way, we're not talking about learning the metaphysics of the course as a metaphysics as something away over there.
Like an exercise.
Like we're using the metaphysical principles to look at states like loneliness, unhappiness, uh, uh, depression, or interpersonal conflict. We're wanting to look at them from a higher viewpoint with a new set of eyes that will liberate us from the experience that we're being victimized by something happening in front of us. Would that be true?
Yes, yes. I think that the metaphysical chart is great to keep nearby because it is a starting point that can release you from a fixed position where, it can just by looking at it can give you a new perspective that you can at least remind yourself. It reminds the mind. So what we really need here are reminders because we're so tied to the judgments and
Yeah, I mean,
grievances.
I've noticed that. Like
Yeah.
when I'm upset with someone, as far as I'm concerned, I get caught up and enclosed in the idea they are making me upset. And then when the thought of the course comes alive in me, I'm never upset for the reason I think. Suddenly, it's like it pulls me up,
Yeah.
but it enables me, it reminds me of the fact that my real problem. So here I am, I'm caught enclosed in this experience. But when the Holy Spirit's mind comes alive in me as the idea, I am never upset for the reason I think, and I'm actually seeing this experience through that lens. I find myself seeing, suddenly I stop blaming. You know what I mean? I go, oh, do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it interrupts. I'm lifted out of that enclosure where I can actually, I've got the space to look at. So I'm looking at my experience from level one principles,
Mm-hmm.
but but I'm still a new way of seeing is opening up because our problem is ignorance, isn't it? Is the way we're seeing. So unless
Yeah.
we have a transformation of mind,
Mm-hmm.
uh, we're in trouble.
Yeah. And the truth is, like you said, we are not upset for the reason we think. We literally, whatever's outside of us did not cause our upset. And so the only reason there's an image that would appear to impact me is so that I can preserve my own identity. I needed that image to preserve my identity. And so when that is not my prime directive anymore, and and I want something else, then I'll be ready. I will experience myself as doing what you said, being pulled out of that. And that's because I wanted to, on another level, you wanted to be pulled out of that.
Right. So when we're looking at the course, we're not looking at learning a new theory about God or the universe or anything like that. We're
Hmm.
looking, the metaphysics is entirely about a transformation of our perception. So that
Right, not the world. Yeah.
not the world. So we're using the metaphysics or
Mhm.
in order to uh, uh, in order for us to see our life in an entirely new way, and so that the way of seeing that is presented in the course, when that comes, so I don't study the course, I study my life and my living in the light of the course. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think that unless you practice the principles and it comes to life in your life, it has very little meaning. I think that, our kind of dedication to seeing the world outside of us as cause, the course undoes that through the practice. And um, uh, that's what I want to say. The world is never going to seem to be different because the world is a reflection of the idea of separation given form. So if you think about the idea of separation coming into the mind and casting a shadow on the wall of the mind, this is the world of shadows. So it has no substance and can't be the cause. And when we're willing to follow that path and practice it in our daily lives with whatever comes up in our life, so it has meaning to us, we will see that. I think we will have that experience.
Yes, because I've seen the, from my perspective, from and I'm a newcomer to the course, but what I think is a major problem is that I can go, oh yeah, the world is unreal. It's not true. It's just a delusion. But what Kenneth Wapnick pointed out, if I'm seeing the world as a source of happiness or unhappiness, I am making it real for me.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so if um, uh, so we're not talking about an ontological postulate. The world is a delusion. Oh yeah, the world's a delusion, right? We're talking about a very practical thing in the sense that when I think that something external is causing me unhappiness, determining the way I am being,
Hmm.
I at this moment are not taking the world as a dream. I am taking it as real. So
Yeah.
so we're talking about the
Hmm.
liberation from the idea that the world is a source of pain or as a source of happiness. And
Right.
while I still believe that, then I can't help but be a victim because the whole premise of my life will come, my whole experience is going to come out of that. So,
Right.
so when we're talking about level one and level two, we're not talking about a metaphysical school of thought about the world, about what we're like. We're talking about being able to look at our daily experience in an
Hmm.
entirely different way, in such a way that we get liberated from uh, uh, our, our pain, our upset, or whatever, and to bring about a state of being in which we're not regretting about the past, we're not fearful about the future, and we're not full of any form of self hatred. Would that be true?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the world is designed to deceive us. Appearances deceive,
Yeah.
and so it's always going to appear as though something impacted us, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but we don't have to. Denying the denial of truth, as the Course says, is looking upon that, not denying our experience of it, but denying the cause of that experience.
Now, yeah, that's interesting because Wapnick makes a distinction. He says, you never deny what the senses are showing you, appearances.
Right.
What we can do is though that we can see those that we're seeing those appearances from a certain way. So, for example, when I'm lonely, I'm having the experience of being lonely. Now, the that is an interpretation. I am lonely, right? And
Right.
and then I'm living out that idea. So what we're talking about in the course is that if we just stick with our view, how we see things,
Yeah.
there's just going to be more of me. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
There's a a philosopher, a Greek philosopher by the name of Heraclitus, who was a pre-Socratic, come before Socrates. And he says, character is destiny. So if we remain the same in terms of how we see ourselves, how we see other people, how we see the world, and we believe that this is how the world is and what it is, we're going to remain the same. There's going to be no shift, is there?
No, there must be a willingness to see things differently.
And the seeing differently is seeing from a higher perspective, which is level one. So we're seeing from level one reflected in this world, which is what changes our perception. So when we're talking about level one and level two, there's a differentiation between my way of seeing and the way of seeing where we're looking through the mind of Jesus at our life.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that it's always important to say that will not make the world look differently, but it changes you. Change not the world, but change your mind about the world.
Okay, so in summary, we're looking at the fact that the problem of human beings is actually centered on them. It doesn't seem to be. It seems to be centered on the experiences that were happening about. But when we're talking about the Course, we're talking about a realization that not only is the problem centered on me, the solution is also centered on me.
Right,
So
one problem.
one problem, one solution. And all the action is what's happening with me, not with what's happening in the world. And that is a level two, that is a level one perspective on my level two experience. Would that be, have I got that right?
Yes, yes, that's true. Because from the perspective, when we deny the truth, we're left with the opposite of truth. And from the truth's perspective, we would just be reliving every moment of every day, the time that terror seemed to take the place of love. And so in order to undo that, we'd have to see things differently. We'd have to see that uh, I am responsible for the world I see.
Right. Okay. So
That's a reflection of truth.
Right. That's a reflection of truth.
Responsibility.
Right. So in summary, when we're looking at level one, we're not postulating a metaphysical world separate and apart from us and all of that sort of stuff.
No.
And the Course's metaphysics is very practical because it enables us to see our life in an entirely different way. And when that comes alive in us as our way of seeing, not as something separate and apart from that, I'm actually, when I'm seeing my life in the light of the Course, and that becomes my seeing, I know when that happens because I can't help but be correspondingly peaceful.
Yes. And what we tend to do in the process is flip-flop back and forth until we decide for all time.
Right. Okay. So we've got an ongoing dialectic where we suddenly see, I'm now in my wrong mind.
Yeah.
The very fact that I can see that I'm in my wrong mind is a Course perception from above. I'm in my wrong mind.
Yes. Yeah. That's an information. Yeah.
And then we can make the shift.
Right. And the Course says the Holy Spirit teaches by contrast. So there would have to be that contrast in order to keep moving in the right direction.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Like, for example, when you suddenly see I'm upset now, I'm hateful, I'm being angry, I'm feeling like I'm right in my anger. But then when I look at it, when the Holy Spirit's mind comes alive in me and I'm looking at that anger and I'm going, wait a minute, if I'm caught up in that anger, I can't be aware of love's presence. I'm actually doing myself in. It'd probably be a good idea to move away.
Yes. Yes. I'd rather be happy than right.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kathy. That's been very illuminating. And
well, this is very enjoyable. Thank you, Bede.
okay, I look forward to seeing you next time.
Me too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.